All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Coach Reese here with Coach Loretta and special guest, Coach Scott. We are here after a little bit of a hiatus last week. Loretta was traveling, she was having all sorts of fun. But we're back here. We're going to be talking about the run walk method, and we're super excited to have Coach Scott on because he's not only been researching, but he's been applying and he's been talking with his athletes about this run walk method. So without further ado, Coach Scott, what is the run walk method?
Wow, thanks so much, you guys. Thanks for having me on here. It's great to think that I actually have something that, you guys might be interested in because I'm a back of the pack guy, middle to back of the pack. So run walk. Okay, let me start out by just saying how, I have to be honest. When I first started running, I had a pretty negative impression of the whole run walk method and intervals. And, I had been a coach for a while, and always the beginner groups were the ones that were doing run walk, usually on the couch to 5K plans. And I always thought, well, that's for beginners, or maybe it's for people that are injured or people that, are just struggling, maybe aren't quite, where they should be training wise. And, I had some stereotypes, and I kind of maintained those for a while because I never really understood this. But I started doing uh, more endurance oriented events, and I thought nothing of using the typical ultra kind of protocol of hiking the big hills, running the flats, running the downs. If it's a steep down, then picking your way down carefully. I thought nothing of varying my pace and my effort level based on the terrain. And it all of a sudden, started me thinking, maybe there's a little bit of overlap here. But it really became clear to me one day when I was doing Tunnel Hill, and I'd been kind of experimenting a little bit with intervals, but my friend Kara was running it, and she was doing the 50 mile, and I was doing the 100. And she had said, this is her first 50. Would I run with her and, kind of help her along? And I said, absolutely. We were about at the same pace typically. I said, absolutely. And so we didn't talk about strategy very much at all until we were in the starting chute. And I said, well, what's your plan today? And she said, well, I'm going to do intervals. And I thought, okay, cool. That sounds good. I'm open to that. And she said, and I said, what breakdown? And she said, 3 minutes running, 1 minute walking. And I said, great. But on the inside, I was thinking, ooh, that doesn't sound like enough running and maybe a lot of walking. But that's how she had trained. I said I was going to do this with her. So we just did this. And, we made great progress. We were cruising right along, not feeling extremely fatigued, not struggling, getting plenty of time to take care of ourselves at aid stations and kind of moving along. And lo and behold, we got to the 50-mile point, which was my halfway and her finish. And I looked at my watch, and it was the fastest 50-mile split I had ever had in any race. And I was like, wow, what is going on here? What just happened? It really shocked me. And I felt great. And I felt so good that I was then able to run the whole second half of that race continuously, feeling good. And it was my fastest 100-mile as a result. And it was like, wow, I really misunderstood this. I really have to look into this further. Up until that point, even a 50-mile event, I would be just dragged out by the end. In the 40s, somewhere, I would be walking and weaving and, feeling lousy, and my stomach would be giving me trouble and, really struggling. But with the interval method, it was like a game changer. And so some friends of mine and I, we started experimenting and talking to other ultra runners about intervals and how they use them. And we found everybody had a wide range of ideas about it. A couple of really strong runners I know did 16 minutes running, 4 minutes walking. Others were doing like 15 minutes running, 5 minutes walking, or some combinations thereof. And, some were doing like 5 minutes and one, or two and one, or, some friend was doing 4 minutes, 30 seconds of running and 30 seconds of walking. So my friends and I, we tried a lot of these combinations out and kind of discovered that the magic really seems to be that 3-in-1 breakdown. And so, kept using that, and actually that next season and the season following Tunnel Hill, I started to have my fastest ultra times of all using intervals. And it was like, wow, this is really interesting. I feel like I'm going slower, but I'm actually getting faster, you know? So it kind of got me thinking about this and got me looking into it. And I just got really curious about it. And I realized that intervals work, for one, and they are really not that different than the process that you use during an ultra where you're kind of letting the terrain dictate. You know, if you have a flat ultra course and you're using intervals, it kind of replicates that same variation that you would normally be doing on a more technical trail. Um, and so I started thinking about this. Well, why do intervals work? And so I have like three main things that I was able to come up with. One, intervals, especially the 3-in-1 breakdown, allow you to manage your heart rate easily. It's very hard to get to max heart rate in just a few minutes of running. And when you have that 1-minute walk break, it allows your heart rate to kind of come back down. It kind of keeps you sort of at an even level like this instead of like spiking and then you crash and maybe you're just so dead you walk for a few minutes and then you run again and you spike and crash. It allows you to kind of keep it within the right range that you need for an endurance event. And Reese, you may have a lot more to say about that because that's kind of your area, but that's a big thing, certainly. Um, the second reason why I think this works so well is the 1-minute walk break gives you a chance to kind of do a head to toe assessment. How am I doing? Where am I at? What is anything going wrong? Do I need to fix something? Do I have a rock in my shoe? Do I need more nutrition? Do I need to, drink more? Do I need to adjust my pack? Do I have some chafing? What's going on? It allows you a minute to kind of like check yourself over, and then you get to start running again. And you can just kind of keep that routine up over and over and over. And it allows you to pay attention to yourself and how you're feeling and how you're doing and how you're performing. And it keeps you hydrated and it keeps the nutrition going in. Third reason is I think it gives you a psychological boost, especially late in the race. When you're really tired and you've been out there for a long time and you're starting to feel lousy and fatigued, you can tell yourself, look, I just need to go 3 minutes. I'm going to run 3 minutes and then I get a little bit of a break. You can do that even late in a race. You can talk yourself into it. If you have 20 miles to go and you're like, oh boy, I just really have to go. I have to get to that finish. That can be a daunting challenge, after you've already run 80 miles, let's say. But if you can break it into little bites, it's psychologically, I think, a little bit easier. So those are some things. And it just sort of kind of comes together and it just sort of helps you kind of keep moving. It
Right.
also allows you to mix up the muscles you're using. You're sort of using different muscle groups and getting a little bit of a break. So
Nice.
Scott, I love all three of those breakdowns. I think just within a couple minutes, you kind of summarize like the best things about the run walk method. And I just want to mention too, I do really like just thinking what you said about the first point of it keeps you on that like even steady pacing. If you can be like diligent and start that at the beginning of the race, I mean, we all know that like we have a hard time going out too easy at the beginning of an ultra marathon because you got the buzz of the starting line, the buzz of the nerves and all that. You can go as hard as you want for 3 minutes and you're probably not going to crack too much higher than like threshold unless you're really trying to like absolutely hammer, which of course we should be practicing and training, especially if we're running ultras you're probably not going to get anywhere near like even like a half marathon or a marathon effort at the start. At least let's hope not. So it is those continual reminders that like, hey, is my pace in check too? Um, so I do like that idea of 3 to 1 being okay. It's frequent enough that it always makes you check in, but it's not so frequent that you're like always having to pay attention to something. I think that's probably one of the hard things, the hardest things that I would have with the walk around method. And I want to hear your thoughts about this. Is like, so a lot of the methods that people use or a lot of the ways that people execute this method is by a little timer, something you can buy on Amazon for like 15, $20, right? And it'll beep. Nice. There we go. You got it handy. That's awesome. Um, so you can set the intervals so that way it beeps every few minutes, right? At 2 different intervals. So it'll beep every 3 minutes and then 1 minute and then 3 minutes and then 1 minute. So you never really have to mentally keep looking down at your watch. But my question is do you ever feel overwhelmed, like something is always talking at you, like you're always paying attention for something? I think a big reason why a lot of us runners go out and run is to kind of like not disassociate completely, but at least to just get in touch with the outdoors. Do you find like it kind of pulls you out of the flow state if you always have something beeping at you?
Well, I think that's a great point, Reese. That is a great point. That is probably one of uh, the cons of this. You've got a thing always beeping or vibrating. This little gadget, it's the Gym Boss. I'm glad you mentioned it. You know, there are other interval timers, but this one is so popular. I mean, everybody who's doing this method pretty much has one of these, and you can get them on Amazon, and we can probably maybe add a link or something about this. This one is the Gym Boss um, Charge. It's rechargeable, which I really like, you know, to save on, you know, disposing of batteries. And it has a backlight, which is great at night. But it is, you can set it to beep or vibrate or both, and you can adjust the volume level and the length of the beeping um, and vibrating. So you can tailor it so it's not as obnoxious, but it definitely is distracting. And if you're the kind of runner that just wants to get into that flow state and just wants to, you know, groove down the trail and just kind of be out there, and maybe you're on a, you know, a kind of a nice easy down runnable section. Maybe you don't want this thing. You could just shut this off. You just push and hold the button, it shuts off,
Hmm.
and then just run, you know, and then just enjoy it. So you could do that, but it is distracting. It could very well be.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you ever forget about it? Like it goes and you're not like, deep into an ultra, we're tired, it's hard to think. Do you ever miss some of your intervals?
Yeah, oh, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. You sometimes do. You're like, well, no, am I on run or am I on walk? And you have to
Yeah.
look. Oh boy. Okay, yeah, I'm supposed to be running. I better better get going. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I've heard of a lot of athletes having success with this method too. A couple that are close to me, they set up their different intervals. They've run tunnel hill, they've done flat races and things like that. And it gives you this opportunity to check in with yourself, to check in with your eating, and to kind of just have that break in the day, whether you're doing 3 and 1 or you experiment with your own. And maybe you go a little bit longer, you go a little bit shorter. So a lot of people have great success during these flat races because of all the reasons that you mentioned, right? Like it gives you something to look forward to. It gives you like a little planned meal time. It gives you that like carrot that's always, multiple little, kind of like the old aid station adage of just make it to the next aid station, just make it to the next aid station. Don't think about what's so far down the road. So you get all of these little wins along the way. And I think that psychological winning like throughout the course of your race is just builds momentum.
Mhm.
But let's talk about like a hilly course. So a little birdie told us that you're going to be running Western States this year. And I want to get your intake on if you're going to be using the run walk method there, or do you kind of dictate whether you use the run walk method for different types of races? Like, how do you delegate that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And that is one of the caveats. I've got a couple caveats about this method, and one of them is it really only works on a flat course.
Mhm.
Uh, when it comes to Western States, I'm obviously no expert. I was only out there for training weekend, but having seen that terrain and kind of looking at the climbs and everything out there, I'm not even going to bring my timers. I'm not even going to pack them and bring them because I won't use them. I won't have an occasion to use them. The climbs are tough and they're just going to be climbing. There's no running. Even some of the really fast runners, fast, strong runners I saw out there were power hiking those climbs. They weren't running much of it. So the timer would be just an annoyance, for some of those, like, the initial climb up out of Palisades, or, Devil's Thumb, those are miles long. Those are going to be, a half hour to an hour climbs probably, maybe more, hour and a half. You don't need the timer. You don't want the timer. That would be just a real annoying distraction. So, but when it comes to some of the nice, easy runnable downs at Western States, I'm going to run those. I'm not going to walk, run, some of those nice, easy, more runnable sections. I'm going to let the course dictate and the terrain. If it's loose and I have to pick my way up or down carefully, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to try to, overpower that horse.
Right.
So that I suppose that comes back to the philosophy that you were talking about at the beginning of the show of, using it on flat courses as sort of like your impromptu hill, So maybe that's something we can visualize or think about when we're on flat courses is, oh, here's the beeper. I have a 1 minute climb ahead of me. I got to be hiking. But okay, so have you ever ran a course that would dictate the use of both methods? Like, say, I think Badwater is a fairly good example, right? Like there's
Yeah.
some climbs in Badwater, there's some good stretches of flat roads, and then you have Mount Whitney at the end, right? So would there be a use for using both methods, carrying it on you, running the flats, and then, or using the walk run method and then hiking and letting the terrain dictate at the end of the race?
Yeah, I would think so. I haven't done Badwater, but and so I can't really speak to that. But yeah, I would say that I do know of courses where I have used both. There are sections where, you probably can use the interval timer, and then other sections where you just have to let the course dictate and just shut the timer off. So yeah, it's just it's a versatile method when can kind of make it fit for the course and the event and the intensity. And I think intervals also are helpful in heat, in extreme heat. There are days in the summer where, I'm running when it's 90 plus degrees, and it's very hard to even keep a slow pace going under those conditions and high humidity. So I'll even use intervals then on a hot course, um,
Mhm.
to manage it a little bit. So
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the science of that, Reese, too. So when we're using it, let's say it is a hot day, or we're using it where we're doing the run walk and we're thinking about heart rate and we're thinking about, keeping your heart rate in like zone 2 or under. Are you looking at that as your average heart rate, or are you looking at as not letting it even go over during those 3 minute increments? Do you understand what I'm saying?
question for me or Reese?
Either of you take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that there would be extreme value in, using it to, so like when you're looking at your watch, you can set it up to tell you what the heart rate is at like different intervals, right? Like you can have it update like every second, every few seconds, whatever it is. You could give a lap average heart rate, and maybe you're lapping your watch whenever you take some of your breaks. But I would almost think that like while you're running in your 3 minutes, if it's hot out or if you're paying attention and you think to yourself like, oh man, am I working kind of hard right now? And you look at your watch and the heart rate is sky high, then maybe it's like, okay, we come back down. I almost think for me, I think it would be too much to think about like, okay, what is my 3 minute lap average heart rate? What is my 1 minute lap average heart rate for all of the intervals, right? So I think it's almost one of those tools to just kind of like reassess what your RPE is while you're running, instead of checking the time, checking your watch, checking this, checking that. But of course, that would be up to the individual, right? I feel like through training, we can kind of, kind of set up those zones or those heart rate ranges as a proxy for your effort and say like, oh, okay, I should be within 120 to 140, or maybe a little lower, a little higher, depending on the interval or the individual. But then when it comes down to race execution, like we want to focus into that feel. At least that would be the way that I would coach that out.
Right. And
So
I agree, but I think maybe not looking at it in the moment, but also just kind of reflecting on your training logs to kind of see. Because I think with the run walk, you can get a kind of skewed vision of where your average heart rate was, because that walk piece is going to bring it down. So if you are really pushing that pace in that 3 minutes and then that 1 minute brings it down, you may be a little skewed to where you think you are. So it might look better than it actually was if you break it out. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
yeah, say like if you go a little bit too hard and then it compensates because you're going a little bit
Yeah.
easier during the walk
Yeah.
breaks. So
Yep.
so really you're pushing like, 3-minute like interval sessions instead of three
Yes.
minute easy sections with some
Yeah,
walking.
yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
It might be easy to go too hard during
Yes.
mhm.
yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep. And that's what
that's
I think.
going to
So I
take some
think if it's,
experience.
yeah, I think like
Yeah,
if it's starting to feel too hard when you're
yeah,
doing it, then you might need to back off a little bit because maybe you are pushing that pace a little bit too much on that 1 minute. Or I mean that on that 3 minute when you really
right.
don't need to. We're still talking about that slow, easy, ultra zone, one zone two pace, right?
Yeah.
We're not looking at pushing hard.
You
I
know,
I advise people to shoot for, an RPE of somewhere around, 4 to 5 during the
Mhm.
run interval, and
Yep.
then the walk interval, not even worrying about it. But, one of the caveats is keeping a good, strong power hike. You do have to keep moving
Hmm.
slowly, deliberately, purposefully down the trail when you're on the walk break. It's not time to just kind of lollygag and lounge around and look at the trees. You're still moving deliberately, and letting your heart rate come down a little bit and recover, but not go down to resting. You're,
Right.
you're still, working hard. But
Right.
yeah,
Right. Yeah, I
yeah,
think that's a good point. And I like to kind of guide like, okay, keep it under 18-minute pace if you can. You like that walking
yeah,
piece under 18.
absolutely. Right, 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 right. Yes, yes. And using your watch to kind of get an idea of where your run pace is and your walk pace is really good to keep in mind.
Right.
One of the things I wanted to mention also is that there are calculators that allow you to figure out your average pace when using intervals. You put in, there's two rows. You put in your running pace and how long, and your walking pace and how long, and it calculates the average or the overall
Hmm.
pace for that combination of speed and interval length. And
Yeah.
so
And
that's very
that can
helpful.
be really handy to be able to use that.
I
Yeah.
love that you mentioned that, Coach Scott, because I actually have used that a couple times with some of my athletes to think to myself, okay, how fast does this athlete typically walk on their walking break? So we can say
Yep.
like, okay, that's like an average of 17 to 20 minutes per mile. So let's
Hmm.
just average that out to like 18.5 minute miles. So now when you have that and we say, okay, we do that for 1 minute, then how fast do our running intervals need to be? So when we look at that pace, and I think to myself, okay, has that athlete been capable of holding those paces in an easy effort range? And if not, then we might have to adjust the time at different intensities. And I
Mhm.
think now, so we've been talking a lot about like race execution, like how to use this thing during your race. I think equally as interesting is, so what about the training periodization, right? Like at what weeks away from a race do we really start to incorporate this interval timer? Do you have your athletes, always using it? Do you go on some long runs where they just hold that steady effort? Where does the training kind of lie with this piece of equipment?
Um, I can tell you what I have experienced and what I recommend for people.
Yeah.
I recommend that they get the interval timer and start doing intervals when they realize, wow, that was a really hard, long run. I'm really wiped out. That was rough. I'm starting to struggle. I don't know if I can do this or not. That's the point at which I say, okay, this person is ready for the sort of concept of slowing down to speed up.
Hmm.
Because if you introduce it too soon in the training cycle, people are like, oh no, they make the same assumptions I did. Oh, this is for beginners, or this is, it's easy to dismiss. But when they need something to help them, move further down the trail and get these longer runs, under their belt, that's a good time, I think, to bring this up. And then I would have them use it the whole rest of the time on their long runs, only on the long runs.
Mm.
It would be a problem if you were trying to do speed work. or
Yeah.
tempo or any other running workouts. This gadget is only for your long runs. So
I like it. And that makes a lot of sense to me because I would almost think that, you know, like we do want to build this sense in our athletes of like, hey, this is the pace that feels good for an hour. This is the pace that, you know, I can do for 2 hours. So maybe that's a good pace. And I know that's not too hard. So you can practice, okay, now I'm going to hold that same pace with these breaks. Instead of using the interval time or the entire time. So they can get used to, hey, what does it feel like to have this extended period of time where I am moving my feet? And then when you add those breaks in there, it just helps like lengthen out that time with which they can go down. And then it sounds too like you're still like you're doing the walk run method for long runs for these races, but you're still incorporating some speed work and some other intervals and things like that. I think that's beautiful because you get to work on like your energy production and your lactate thresh and these measurements of actual fitness. And then when it comes to actually executing a longer race, that's when it comes into play. So we're not like substituting the timer for everything in our runs. It's just a tool that we bring out at key moments.
Yeah,
Is that about right?
Yeah, I like that a lot.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to, maintain a traditional multi-speed training
Mhm.
protocol during the training and also use this thing on the long slow. I introduce this kind of concept to my athletes of, okay, we have our speed work pace, we have tempo, we have long slow, but there's also another one. There's another pace that I call the all day pace. What pace could you maintain all day long and all night long? If it's a long ultra. What is that? And let's figure it out. And it's different than your long run pace.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's good. And I think that,
you're
when you're using the timer for the long runs as you're getting ready for a flat course race, it's also a good opportunity to get out there and get some race specificity on flat terrain so that you're ready for that. Your body's mechanically ready for that. You're able to use the tool without feeling stressed out about it, and making sure you know how to start it and stop it and all of that. I think one thing that some of my athletes that use it get a little bit stressed about is, let's say they get to a course, or maybe it's there's just a training run and they encounter a few hills along the way, right? Because it's hard to get completely flat and they don't know what to do at that point. So for me, I just kind of guide them like, if there's a hill, maybe your intervals are going to change up a little bit. It's okay to walk that hill if that's where you feel like you need to have that walk, and then fall back into that 3-1. Do you do anything different, or is that how you would guide as well?
That's exactly it. The terrain trumps the timer,
Yeah.
in my view. Yeah. When you're getting to a section where you just can't run this, then yep, ignore the timer or just shut it off or just set it aside and let the terrain dictate. And then when you get back to a section where it is more runnable, then okay, start the timer back up again. Yeah, don't try to run
Right.
hills with the
Yep.
timer.
Yep. That's good, I think.
Oh, yeah. So couple caveats, to this while we're thinking about it. Works better on flat courses or flat sections of courses, I would say. You really need to have the timer. A lot of watches are set to do intervals, but it's really distracting when you're trying to fumble through all your screens and find your average pace and all these, all the data that you want to have, and also use your watch for the intervals. It's just too complicated. This thing is great. It just runs all by itself, rechargeable. This will last through 100 miler, no problem. The battery operated kinds, if you put a fresh battery in it, it'll last the whole time as well, no problem. But you do need to have this. Um, the backlit version of this is really nice at night. And one other thing about these timers is you can hand it off to your pacer if you have a pacer. If you don't want to be bothered with it, if it's interfering with your flow, give it to your pacer. Have your pacer guide you and let you know, oh, okay, it's time to walk, it's time to run. Let them do the work. Um, Another caveat is that, and we mentioned this before, you need to have a strong power hike. You have to practice a good, strong power hike. And as Reese said, you need to know what your uh, power hike pace is, what your target is. Um, I would recommend using your watch to kind of make sure that you are where you need to be during your run interval, pace-wise, and also during your walk interval. And I also recommend having a screen on your watch, if you're capable of doing this, of having your instantaneous pace in the moment during both of those things. So you can see, oh yeah, okay, well, I'm at 11:30. That's where I need to be for my run. Okay, now I'm at 14. That's where I need to be for my walk. But then also having a screen with your elapsed pace, average pace from the start, so that you know where you are and if you're below cutoff and where you need to be. Are you targeting an overall pace of 16, let's say, and you're starting to slip below that? That means you need to be working a little bit harder on your run or your walk intervals, or maybe both, to kind of keep you on track to your goal of executing, your completion at whatever time you're targeting at whatever pace it's going to take to get you there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yep, that makes sense. And I kind of want to go back a little bit. In the beginning, you mentioned, that you're a mid backpacker. This isn't just something that mid to backpackers are using, right? There are elite runners that are setting American and world records that are also using a run walk method. It may not be the 3-1, it could be something a little bit different. I spend a lot of time at tracks with at races where people are working to set records and people are doing it. I'm watching them do it. I'm listening to their, timers going off. And I think that one of the other keys is when we're doing this kind of method is knowing that that is our race day strategy. That's our plan. We're not doing it because we have to walk, that we're tired and it's time, we're just at the point we don't know what else to do. This is our plan and we're going in with it. And this is how we're starting our race. And this is how we're going to finish our race, right? Is that plan? I think that's super helpful psychologically, knowing that this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, Loretta. At the Hennepin 100 last year, how if you're not familiar, the start is, kind of a mass start down a paved bike path, basically through the park and on down into town a little bit, across a bridge, and, and out onto the trail. There were so many of these things beeping and going off. It was like being in a field of crickets.
You're like, which one's mine?
You have to look at yours to see if it was time to walk or not, because everybody was using these things. And it was like, wow, this is
That's probably
really
because
a
of you. You're
common
setting
method.
the trend. You're setting the trend in the Ornery Mule community.
I
Coach
don't
Scott
know, but
uses it. We're all getting one.
it works. I'm a believer. I am. It works. It helps so many people. But one quick little story, kind of sort of a funny little story. I was coaching an athlete a couple of years ago, and she had only ever done a half distance, and she wanted to do a trail, and she wanted to do 50K. And so it's like, okay, well, we've got some training to do here. And so her training was pretty good, but it wasn't exactly where she had hoped it would be. She had missed a few runs here and there. And it came to be race day, and she was like, okay, no, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I need to drop down. Her confidence was shot. And I was like, well, no, no, no. Let's just do this. We'll use the intervals. She had trained on intervals. Um, I'll go along with you. We'll just run this together. I was going to be doing the 50K also. And so we got going, and the intervals were doing exactly what they do, is give you a chance to kind of check in and kind of, regroup and manage your effort level. And we got cruising along. And this was a course that had an aid station at about mile 16 out of 31. And we got to that aid station, and she said, well, okay, I think I'm done. I'm gonna pull the plug. And I said, well, we've been doing really well. We've made all this progress. We've had a great day out here. Everything's going okay. And so if you want to, you can turn around and walk 16 miles back to the start and get a DNF, or you can continue on with intervals with me for 15 miles and we'll get a medal. And she said, all I want to do is punch you in the mouth right now.
Oh, I love it.
And so she kept going, and we kept cruising along, and she got to the end, even though she didn't think she could. She didn't think she could possibly manage it and make this happen on that day. And, was not confident at all, but she did it and did well and really, executed exactly as we had trained for and planned.
Right.
She just
Nice.
needed that little boost.
There comes out Coach Scott, psychologist. You have a choice. You can do this.
Well, what would you choose?
Exactly. That's great because today I got a text from one of my athletes. She had went over by accident a little bit yesterday because she just read the plan wrong. And so today she's like, well, could I take like this much off of my tempo run today? I'm like, well, you could, but it would be okay if you did your tempo run. So of course later she texted and she had done it and she's like, I'm not sure that I like it that you like my know my psychology so well that you knew I would finish that if you said that. I'm like, yep, I did.
So much
That's
for this is
one of the benefits of having a coach though, right? Is to be able to help in those situations.
Mhm. Mhm.
So at Tunnel Hill last year, Laz Lake, he was giving a special talk the night before the race. Everybody's eating their spaghetti, and there was some cake and some desserts and some treats and stuff there. And it's this anecdote about how when he started running, everybody, no matter the distance, you would start at breakneck speed, you would hold breakneck speed until you were absolutely trashed. And then once if you had to stop, if you had to walk, you were done. That was it. You weren't going on anymore. And he goes, we didn't know what we were doing back then. He goes, if you pace yourself, if you run, walk, and you think about the race as the quickest that you can get from point A to point B, the best, like that's what the whole goal is, to get to the finish line as fast as you possibly can. So for a lot of these races, as fast as we possibly can doesn't always mean going out at breakneck speed and holding on and hoping for the best, or, DNFing because you can't stop puking in a bucket. It's more, finding that rhythm and finding that gear. And I think this walk run method is helping a lot of people find that gear of what is my all day effort? What is my all day pace? How do I keep going on further? If I can't continuously run for 100 miles or 50 miles or whatever it is. And I think, too, like just playing devil's advocate, if somebody were to say oh, it's a running race, why would we be walking? It's running. And I'm like, I would think to myself, it's a running race for sure. And a majority of it for a lot of people is going to be running to get underneath the cutoff. But at the same time, the overall goal of any race, whether it's running or a walking race or whatever, is to get to point B as quickly as you possibly can. So if this is a strategy that you haven't tried and you're wondering, how can I get a little bit faster? Sometimes, like you said, Coach Scott, it's not about moving faster. It's about like strategizing a little bit more. So that way, when you're running, you can run a little bit faster. When you're walking, you can take that break that you need to help cool your body, bring your heart rate down, get you some food and some fuel, and keep going as quickly as you can. So I think like it's a definitely a popular strategy that is often underused. Now I suppose it's gaining speed, at least in Hennepin in our circles. So I'm glad to hear it. Thanks for supporting the message and getting it out there for the people.
Do we have these little timers on the Ornery Mule website?
We
On the
should
page?
have those.
Mhm.
Maybe we need some Ornery Mill racing timers. I'm gonna get on Michelle on that. Like, get
That's
these
fun.
ordered.
Yeah, that's a great recap, Coach Reese. Thank you. That's great. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
And
gonna.
thanks for coming on the show. I guess, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about walk, run, or your races? Any more anecdotes that you have for us?
Or any coaching or any fun stories, we'll take it all. You've got good stories, Scott.
We talked about intervals of 3 and 1, which I think is a good breakdown, a good combination because of managing your heart rate. But there's a lot of other people that do other combinations of intervals, and so I would keep that possibility open for any given athlete. What they feel is the best breakdown for them and how much time they need. So. And there are some times when people alternate their intervals during the race, when they're starting to get tired and they just can't do 3 and 1, maybe they'll go to 2 minutes, 30 seconds and one, or maybe they'll go to 3 minutes run, a minute, 30 seconds of walk. They sometimes vary that a little bit,
Okay.
but so it's kind of individualized, but 3 and 1 seems to be a good breakdown for most people.
Right. And then probably at that point, sometimes it's more of a mental game than a physical game.
Yeah.
In the race, like when you're starting to feel like you have to go a little bit less. And I think that's kind of, I'd like to talk about that a second. It's a little off of the run walk, but something you mentioned earlier in working with your athlete. And I'm thinking about kettle coming up this weekend. So this is all those runners that are out there going to go do kettle is, there are points in a race when sometimes you feel like you can't keep going and that you're done and you're considering that DNF. But I think Scott, brought a really nice point, like let's think about this for a minute. You have a minute or so to think about it before you actually make that decision, right? To drop. And so when you get to that point in your race, I think this weekend or whenever is like thinking about it, checking yourself, and then looking at the things that could be going wrong, right? Nutrition, hydration. Is it just I need to change my mindset at this point in the race? Like what's going on before you make that final decision to pull the plug? And I think you really helped guide your athlete that way. And I think that that's, a really good thing to think about.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times I'll tell my athletes, if you are even thinking about dropping, go to the next aid station and then call me
Yeah.
anytime.
Yes. Yep.
And then I'll tell you, no, you're not dropping.
Yep.
And just keep telling them, go to the next aid station and call
That's
me.
right.
And keep
Call me at
telling
the
them.
next aid station. Just call me
It's
again.
at the next aid station. Just go there, get a banana and go.
Yep. Yep.
It's like the running version of just sleep on it. Just sleep on the decision for a little. Just
Yeah.
make it to the next aid
24
station and
hours to
think
make the
about
decision. You can't make a
it.
decision for 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
So I guess you'll have to keep going.
The only other anecdotes or things that I would want to say is that, I'm just looking forward to Western States. It's a huge opportunity. It is such an honor, such a blessing. It's just so amazing. I was out at Squaw Valley 10 years ago and I was looking at that course and I was at the starting rock there with the plaque and I thought, there is absolutely no way I would ever be able to do this because this is just too hard. And, I had tried to run the first few miles of the course and it was like, wow, this is for people that are some other form of human than me. But now here I am, 10 years later, literally almost to the day, 10 years later, I was at Squaw Valley, last weekend, or at Palisades now, it's changed names, at that same plaque. I took a picture. I sent that to you, I think, Coach
Yeah.
Loretta.
Yeah. I posted it on our social media.
Wow, what an opportunity, what a privilege it is to think that, with training and, trying to be very deliberate and trying to do everything I can to train for this, that now I have this chance. So I'm going to use every ounce of energy I can to get through this course and get up these climbs and just enjoy being out there and just be part of that group, that little tiny limited group that gets to do this wonderful thing. It's just incredible out there. And I hope that everybody at some point in their running career gets a chance to either visit that course or maybe run it.
Right.
Wow, what an
That's
opportunity.
amazing. We
So,
are going to be all cheering at you on, supporting you, tracking you for that race. I'm super excited for you. And I think that's
right.
huge. Like if you have a goal, if it's something that you want to do, like I always say, dream big and go after it, whatever it takes to get you to that point. So that's really inspirational. Scott,
Right.
did you change anything in your training that you added that maybe you have never done for a
Oh my
race or
gosh,
done something
yes.
different you want to
Yeah.
share?
Oh my gosh, yeah, so much, so much. This has been unlike any other training, because I don't have mountains here. So I've gone out to Lake Michigan, to the lake shore, to run dunes up
Mm-hmm.
and down and across. And then a friend of mine, Sarah, who is running Leadville, was doing some training there. And so she introduced me to this little route of hers called Sarah's Circle of Pain. You run up the dune, run across the top, run down, kind of like in a big triangle with beautiful views of Lake Michigan from the top, just gorgeous with the breeze blowing up off the lake, just so nice. But trying to get as much vert as I possibly can, that parking ramps up and down, stair mill every week, treadmill cranked all the way up to 15%, just anything I can do to try to simulate, the terrain and the grind, of these climbs.
Right.
And then also a lot of heat training, trying to do as much heat training as possible, strength training. I was doing a lot of agility work, thanks Loretta for the reframe on that because I was playing pickleball and I was like, oh no, this isn't going to help me. And you said, well, no, it might be a good agility drill. And it has been, but I've shifted away because now I'm moving more toward more specificity in my training, to really simulate the conditions of the course and everything and that demand. So pickleball now has kind of, taken a back seat, but trying to do everything I can to get ready for this and going to training camp. That was really, really valuable.
Nice. Sounds like you did some super smart training and you probably are the fittest you've been and ready to
I feel
roll.
like it. I feel like it. I feel like I'm really on top. Yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
I was amazed. I had like no carnage after training weekend. Nothing. I mean, I was no blisters, chafing, a couple little, hot spots here and there, one in my hamstring, but really no major carnage after running 72 miles in the mountains, over 3 days. So
Right. Nice. Impressive.
That's amazing. Yeah, we've got all of our fingers crossed for you, Coach Scott.
indeed,
Quick question for you too. If other people want to reach out to you and congratulate you on your Western States entry or give you kudos, support, reach out as an athlete looking for coaching, where can we find you?
on the Ornery Mule coaching page.
All right.
That's where I am.
Awesome.
I,
And
I
Coach
have a
Scott
very
does,
small social media presence.
yeah. But Coach Scott does have some openings, right? Or after Western States, he has openings. He's been
I
putting
sure
a lot
do.
of focus
Yep.
on that. But if you're interested in working with Coach Scott, you can always reach out to me at loretta.ornerymule racing@gmail.com and I can get you hooked up with a conversation. As you can tell, he's a wealth of knowledge, awesome human, great coach. Everybody loves him. So yeah.
Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate that. We have a
Yeah.
great coaching team. You guys are awesome.
And we appreciate you joining on. So thanks for sharing all of your wisdom.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well,
Well,
thank
take
you.
care, guys.
Yeah.
Enjoy
Have a
your
great
week.
weekend.
Have fun with your runs. Good luck to everybody running kettle this weekend. And go out there and crush your long runs.
Whoop, whoop. Bye.
All right. Bye.